In the heart of Europe, a lifeline has been cut. The flow of Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia halted in an instant. As Ukrainian drones strike at Moscow's economic jugular, Europe braces for the shockwaves. Hungary, defiant in its reliance on Russian crude, finds itself once again at the center of a storm where politics, war, and energy collide. Tonight, we take you inside a crisis that could redraw the lines of Europe's future. Russian crude oil deliveries to Hungary and Slovakia via the Druzhba pipeline were halted on Monday. With Budapest blaming the stoppage on a Ukrainian strike against the network, Reuters quoting two officials from both the countries reported. Ukraine has intensified attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure, a crucial source of revenue for the Kremlin's war effort, with oil and gas sales making up roughly a quarter of Moscow's state budget. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, while neither confirming nor denying responsibility for the latest strike, wrote on X that Hungary can now send complaints to Moscow, not Kyiv.
It is Russia, not Ukraine, who began this war and refuses to end it. Hungary has been told for years that Moscow is an unreliable partner. Despite this, Hungary has made every effort to maintain its reliance on Russia.
Unlike most EU members, Hungary has maintained heavy dependence on Russian energy since the invasion of Ukraine, sourcing the bulk of its crude from the Druzhba pipeline, which transits Belarus and Ukraine before reaching Hungary and Slovakia. Peter Szijjártó wrote on Facebook that he had spoken with Russian Deputy Energy Minister Pavel Sorokin, who told him experts were working to repair a transformer station allegedly damaged in the latest attack. However, there was no clarity on when oil deliveries would resume.
Ukraine has once again attacked the oil pipeline leading to Hungary, cutting off supplies. This latest strike against our energy security is outrageous and unacceptable.
According to Russian government data, the Druzhba pipeline delivered 4.78 million metric tons of oil, about 95,000 barrels per day, to Hungary last year. Hungary's rationale rests on three pillars: affordability, security, and infrastructure reality. Officials argue that sudden decoupling would send household energy bills sharply higher, undermine the government's subsidy system that caps prices, and strain public finances. Geography compounds the problem. As a landlocked state, Hungary has little access to LNG terminals and limited interconnectors to diversify supply quickly. The country's refining system also locks it into Russian oil. MOL's refineries are optimized for Urals crude. Switching to alternative grades would require costly technical adjustments and involve premiums on replacement imports. That, in turn, would ripple through refined product markets, raising costs not only for Hungary, but for regional customers who rely on Hungarian fuel exports. Budapest frames the issue not as preference, but as risk management. The government argues that a rapid break from Russian molecules could cause more volatility than the system can bear, triggering inflation, budgetary stress, and social discontent. Beyond economics, Hungary presents its position as a defense of sovereignty and legality. At the EU level, Budapest invokes the unanimous June 2022 decision as proof that its exemption remains binding. It also insists that energy mix and supply choices are national competencies, not matters for Brussels to impose. On the international stage, Hungarian officials cite frameworks such as the Energy Charter Treaty, which they argue protect long-standing contracts and infrastructure-linked trade. In their view, any move to nullify these arrangements risks legal disputes and investor claims. Hungary has also rejected proposals to reroute supplies via Croatia's pipeline system. While technically feasible, officials insist it would be costlier and misaligned with Hungary's refining slate. Croatia, meanwhile, would gain transit fees, another political sticking point for Budapest. Domestically, cheap energy is also political. Hungary's system of regulated household bills has long been central to Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's social contract. A fast shift to non-Russian supplies could unravel that model, forcing higher prices on households and fueling political backlash. Politically, Hungary has tied its energy position to its broader stance on Ukraine. Budapest has opposed deeper EU sanctions and resisted financial or military aid to Kyiv. In its view, Brussels' energy policies unfairly make Hungary pay for Ukraine's accelerated EU membership bid.
It is Russia, not Ukraine, who began this war and refuses to end it. Hungary has been told for years that Moscow is an unreliable partner. Despite this, Hungary has made every effort to maintain its reliance on Russia.
Ukraine counters that Hungary's position strengthens Moscow and weakens EU unity. Each disruption, Kyiv argues, proves the danger of clinging to Russian energy. Hungary's dependence has been tested repeatedly. On August 13th, Ukrainian forces struck the Uniacha oil pumping station in Russia's Bryansk region. Just days later, on August 18th, another strike hit a transformer station linked to the Druzhba pipeline, halting flows of Russian crude to Hungary and Slovakia. Slovakia's pipeline operator Transpetro confirmed the halt, emphasizing the disruption originated outside Slovak territory. For Hungary, it was another reminder of how vulnerable its energy lifeline has become. In response, Szijjarto spoke directly with Russian Deputy Energy Minister Pavel Sorokin, who assured him that experts were working to repair the damage. But no timeline was given for when deliveries would resume. For Budapest, such uncertainty exposes the inherent fragility of relying on a single pipeline that runs through a war zone. These episodes highlight two conflicting realities. For Brussels, the strikes reinforce warnings that dependence on Russia is unsustainable and risky. For Budapest, they strengthen the case for caution, arguing that diversification must be carefully sequenced to avoid shocks. Because EU sanctions require unanimity, Hungary's leverage is structural. Orbán's government has repeatedly used its veto to block or dilute sanctions packages that tighten energy measures. It has linked energy debates to broader disputes over Ukraine assistance and accession, insisting that Brussels cannot retroactively undermine exemptions agreed in 2022. This posture frustrates member states pushing for maximum pressure on Russia and an accelerated energy transition. Some capitals now see Hungary as drifting into energy exceptionalism, prioritizing national bargains over collective strategy. The rift is wider than oil. Hungary's long-term plans include expanding nuclear capacity with Russia's Rosatom, further entrenching energy ties with Moscow. On gas, the country remains locked into pipeline flows, including through Turkstream, with limited LNG options. These dynamics deepen suspicion among neighbours. Croatia, Slovakia and Austria all play roles in shaping Hungary's alternatives through transit fees, capacity constraints and political goodwill. That gives Budapest's neighbours bargaining power, even as Hungary seeks to preserve autonomy. Hungary remains the EU's most defiant outlier on energy, clinging to Russian oil despite Brussels' 2028 phase-out target. With 86% of its crude arriving via the Druzhba pipeline, Budapest argues that cutting ties would devastate its economy and drive up household bills. The EU's 2022 exemption shields Hungary from the embargo, allowing state refiner MOL to profit while the government taxes flows. Recent Ukrainian strikes on Druzhba infrastructure exposed Hungary's vulnerability, halting supplies and underscoring its reliance on Moscow's assurances. Yet Budapest insists this path is about sovereignty as much as economics, rejecting Croatian pipeline alternatives as costly and linking its energy stance to opposition over EU sanctions and aid for Kyiv. Analysts say upgrades, LNG access and EU subsidies could eventually make diversification viable. But for now, Hungary is betting that pragmatism outweighs solidarity. To Brussels, this is a unity test. To Ukraine, a reminder that dependence on Russia is itself a battlefield. For Hungary, it remains a gamble. Cheap energy today against deeper isolation tomorrow.